Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Ryan Grimm will be back. He's just broken a big story about Joe Biden. Time's up in the Me Too movement that he's going to dig into. Edward Unweso has a report about how Uber drivers in particular are dealing with this moment and the shutdown, and also Detailer, who's the president of Unite Here. They represent a lot of service workers across the country, are going to talk about how their members are dealing with this moment and what they need to be able to be made whole. And that's what we want to start with here this morning, because reportedly Congress has reached an agreement on a stimulus deal that would help individual small businesses and big businesses.
Yeah, so the Senate announced this deal last night on the Senate floor right around midnight. So let's just give you the top line. It's about a $2 trillion deal. And part of the part that applies to most of us, and the thing we should care most about, is the one-time payment of $1,200 per individual. That's a $2,400 for couples, $3,000 for a family of four because of the $500 payments for children. Now, noteworthy that this begins to take, this cuts off around the $99,000 income level for people based on their last tax return, and it tapers in between $75,000 and $100,000. Now, the most important thing in this bill actually is not even just the one-time payment; it's the expanded unemployment benefits. And so, for that, you can basically ensure that they have included 1099 contractors, gig workers, and pay up to as much of their full salary as possible on a state-by-state basis for people to be able to go and apply as they normally would for unemployment. And that's been expanded for a period of 4 months. So that's actually arguably one of the most important things in the bill, Krystal.
And also, by the way, that coverage would be retroactive to January 27th, and they're adding $600 per week to normal state benefits, as Saagar said, up to 4 months. Additional 13 weeks of benefits to 39 weeks of regular unemployment insurance. So they are significantly beefing up what you will get and when you can get it in terms of unemployment benefits. So that's good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And so at the same time, we know about the industry elements of this package, which is that it's about $500 billion. This was the main sticking point that was happening in terms of Secretary Mnuchin and the so-called slush fund. So what they've done is they've added what they had in TARP, which is this time around they're going to have a lot more. They're going to have an independent overseer of the funds, a lot more oversight of the administration, and they're going to have like a board of experts in terms of doling out the funds. Of course, a lot of this money already has been earmarked for the airline industry and for much of that. And ultimately, it's the airline industry and the cargo carriers who have been the hardest hit. However, I'm disappointed, and I'm sure you are as well, is that there's not a lot more strings attached to this money. Is that these companies, they can't buy back their stock for 2 years. There's no supply chain provisions in the bill. There's no worker protections, or there's not the real worker protections that we need to be looking at, which are in the bill. So overall, I think the unemployment section is the biggest benefit to working people that I have seen yet come out of Congress. The payment, too little, too late. It's just not enough money in order to backfill. We're talking 2 weeks of lost income.
That's right. And people also wanting some certainty going forward. This is just a one-time payment. I mean, look, it's better than nothing. It's something. I'm glad that they are looking like they're ready to pass this. There's also small business provisions that we've been talking about here, and I know many of you own small businesses that have been wondering about these pieces too. They do have provisions to back up your payroll, to support your payroll, and potentially see those loans forgiven. So that would essentially be a grant so that you can keep your employees on staff, which I think is also really important, because ideally for workers, they don't lose their jobs during this time. They're able to keep their jobs, stay with their employers where they are, and receive their normal pay so that when things do reopen, they can just pick right back up where they left off. So that piece looks good as well. Marco Rubio had been really key on that.
Yeah, Marco Rubio was the main pusher. And this is the key thing, is that you have to not only backfill people's payments with a one-time, backfill people's income with a one-time payment. You got to keep the businesses whole whenever it comes to payroll, because then the credit markets, they're not going to be able to go out and take down lines of credit in order to make their payroll payments, or they're going to have to fire all their workers. In many cases, that's already what had happened. We put out a call yesterday for rising stories for people who've been hurt by this crisis. Both Krystal and I mean, just devastated reading some of these. And one of them was actually from a small business owner. I'll be talking about this in my radar as well, who put out a story about how this crisis has affected him. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I own an event rental company. We're a small business that rents out tents, tables, chairs, stages, dance floor, lighting, music equipment to various events. We also have a running the core business. Due to the corona, every single one of our events got canceled. It looks like we're not going to be able to service anybody until the following year, next summer. We were forced to lay off every single one of our workers. Me and my beautiful fiance were supposed to get married in August. Had everything set. We're party planners at the end of the day. And we had to postpone everything, including this beautiful house that we found, because we're not certain how things are going to play out.
It's a heart-wrenching story there from one of our fans, and it's just, I mean, it shows you, which is that even the $1,200 payment, even making the payroll whole, it's not going to bring that back.
Right.
It's not going to bring a lot of that back. And then this just shows what the hole that is going to be left, even unemployment insurance for some people out there who have lost their job. Just the wage, I mean, that's not going to be able to backfill so much of what these people have lost. And meanwhile, you look at, the airline industry and all these other people, and they don't really have to, I mean, Boeing, right? We'll talk about this as well. The Boeing CEO out there trying to posture over the terms under which he takes money.
Yeah.
And these these industries lobbied so hard in the last couple of days. I can tell you from some of the inside knowledge I have on how this whole thing came together against the supply chain provisions, which I was pushing significantly through Congress. You would not believe what they threw at the wall in order to make sure that they could still manufacture goods in China, that they didn't have to maintain, or they didn't have to fundamentally change the way that they do business, that they didn't have to change their corporate board makeup. And so much of this, their argument was, no, we got to get this done fast. But as you and I talked about, the corporations can wait. They could have waited.
Yep.
The fact that this was all tied together it's not unintentional. It was a completely intentional move in order to make sure that they could get the corporate backstops on the best favorable terms possible tied to payments to the American people.
That's exactly right.
The first part should have been payments. The second part should have been the loans or the grants to small businesses. It shouldn't even be $350 billion. It should be $900 billion. And these things should have been passed piecemeal. First payments, then the loans to small businesses. Then we can talk about corporate bills.
And why do they do it that way? Because if there's an individual standalone vote on corporate bailouts, you're going to get a lot tougher provisions if you get it at all. I mean, to your point about Boeing CEO, and I think that we're being totally played on how many of these companies and industries really need this money in the way that young man that we just heard from really needs the help
he's
right
the person
now.
I care about. I don't care about
absolutely,
Boeing.
and he's the person that is not having his voice heard in this town because he doesn't have a lobbyist to go and talk to all these lawmakers. He doesn't have the money to go and grease their palms with campaign contributions, et cetera, et cetera. The Boeing CEO comes out on CNBC and says, oh, if the government's going to take an equity stake in Boeing, I don't want the money. What does that tell you? It tells you they don't really need the money in the first place. And so, one of the things that we talked about yesterday, we'll continue to talk about, is they should have made the bailout fund for industry so onerous that you would only take it if you really, really needed it. Fine, have your bailout, but the government's going to take an equity stake. Your CEO compensation isn't going to be just like you can't have bonuses. It's going to be severely curtailed. You're going to have a worker on your board. You still want the money? Great, you can have it. But of course, because they lumped it in with the individuals that every American wants to help that young man, at least the ones that aren't in this town, right?
Yeah.
Every American wants to help that young man. Every American wants to help small businesses. And so by putting these things all together, you create a big slush fund for industry so they get what they want with very few strings attached. We should add, too, that, there was some question of the president was asked whether he would take any of this money for his businesses. Democrats did get a provision put in to make sure that would not be a possibility, which is a good thing. They also added in more money for hospitals, something we've been covering here. They're facing potential bankruptcy because they're not able to do the elective surgeries that are actually the cash cow that keeps them afloat in normal times. They actually have to, focus on critical care here.
That's the perfect analogy, though, which is that what we're doing is we're bailing out an already broken system. We're not changing the system.
We're not changing anything.
Don't have to change these people. many of these hospital administrators are actual crooks who have set up their systems in order to make money off of elective surgery, plastic surgery, all this other BS. And they can't make money. Look, these people are doing more work than ever, but they're not making any money taking care of actually sick people because that's not how the healthcare system is structured. And so, look,
because the care system is not set up around care.
And it's
set
not
up
just
around
healthcare.
profit.
That's everything. Look at Boeing. Boeing is a company which bought back $43 billion in stock, and it can't build a new plane, right? And
not
this
one
is a
that
company,
flies anyway.
Not one that flies. And so this is a company that takes 1/3 of their revenue from the federal government, and he's out there saying, "Oh yeah, I'm not going to, if it comes with a government stake in my company, then I don't want that." The federal government already owns you. And it's time that we start actually using our state power to make these companies behave in the public interest, because they're not doing it. Over and over again, they serve their corporate and executive bottom lines, and they don't serve the actual workers. The workers at the Boeing company are the only people I care about, as well as the planes that they can actually produce. And these other people, they can go to hell.
Yeah, well, and look, we saw how this played out in 2008.
Yeah.
Right? We saw what happened is the big banks, the big guys got even bigger, right? Mm-hmm. And it was the small and the medium businesses that were hurt, and it was the middle class that was hollowed out. This package lays the groundwork for exactly that to happen again. Big industry, well taken care of. They're going to be just fine. They're going to get right back on their feet. No problem moving forward.
Right.
That young man with his small business, it's going to take years for them to be able to rebuild what they had.
Or buy his house. Or get married.
Or get married. Exactly. It's going to take years for him to get back on his feet. And, the fact that, okay, good, I'm glad we're backstopping their payroll. That's good. I'm glad we're getting at least a one-time payment. But it is minuscule in comparison to the loss that he and so many others out there are facing.
And keep your eye on the follow-on, because now they can pat themselves on the back and say help has been on the way.
We did the biggest stimulus package ever.
The biggest stimulus package in the history of the United States, Main Street, blah, blah, blah. No. If this thing continues to deteriorate, this is only the beginning of what needs to be a comprehensive program to actually make sure that workers are taken care of. And you and I will be pushing that as hard as possible.
We will keep pushing that. And thank you to those of you who shared your hashtag Rising Stories. Please continue to do so. I can tell you, both Saagar and I were incredibly moved. And, it's helpful for us in our coverage to know what life is really like, what you guys are really going for. And I think also for each other, to support each other in solidarity, to see how much everyone is struggling in this moment, I think is also really important. So thank you for that, and continue to share. We're going to tell you what's on our radars. That's next.